They don't use cells anymore. A cell implies restraint, boundaries, structure. This was a waiting room for people already erased. 4 walls that hummed like the inside of a dying animal, and a floor that tilted just slightly downhill, like it wanted you to slide somewhere lower. There were no lights, just phosphorescence. A leaking chemical lathered in mesh film, glowing like the last thoughts of a bad brain. I watched it for 6 hours, measured the flicker interval, 97 seconds, regular as breath. I mapped the seams in the ceiling with my eyes, counted 12 hairline cracks in the synthcrete, and committed the fracture patterns to memory in case I needed to break out. I wouldn't, but it's a habit. The floor trembled with engine cough every few minutes, like the ship itself was ashamed to still be moving. The transport was old, older than anything still rated for deep orbit burn. They didn't upgrade things for people like me. You don't put new tires on a hearse. They sent a voice instead of a guard, not a comm, just a vibration in the walls, modulated low so it rattled the jaw before the ears caught it. Some contractor's attempt at psychological intimidation. Mission coordinates uploading, provisional asset 17 RV Ashglass, confirm pulse acceptance. I nodded once. The pulse came, sharp, centered in the spine, like a hot wire drawn through bone. The tether node lit in my back. My leash had gone active. 17 black deployments, and they still pretended I had a choice. Outside the door, boots scraped metal, the kind of sound that people make when they want to remind you they're armed. I smelled what passed for disinfectant, a resinous sting like burnt citrus and static. Then the door folded inward. Threx entered like a funeral came with him. No rank patches, no smile. He moved like something waiting to be uncovered, not introduced. Face pale, eyes sunk deep in, hair slicked down like wet ash. He lit a match, not for warmth, not for light, just to watch the flame fight the air. "You're awake early," he said, voice low, old-world formal, like a chaplain with a bullet under his tongue. "I don't sleep on mission days," I said. "Shame. Might be your last dream." He pocketed the match. I stood. He didn't flinch, just tilted his head like measuring threat vectors. "You remember the assignment? Relay station K-12, dead station, black box recovery, no return clause." "Good. The others are waiting." I didn't ask who the others were. They were bodies with functions, human components in the shape of a fire team. I'd see them soon enough. The assembly chamber was near the shuttle lock, and it stank of heat-peeled insulation. The floor was scuffed with boot tracks and drag marks. Someone had been bleeding before they got here, probably on another op, probably still here in some airlock, half-named. A mission is like a throat. You don't count teeth, you count what's left after the scream. Praxlin Muir, called Prax, was already checking his ordnance. He loaded grenades like a priest, loading communion wafers. Big man, shrapnel tattoos up both arms. Smile that said he thought dying would finally be interesting. Juno was muttering to himself in a corner, kept tapping a metal coin against his helmet like it would change the outcome. He'd died 7 times already, according to him. 8th time's the one that sticks, he said. Superstition made palatable when it rhymes. The twins, Korev and Vex, finished each other's reloads. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it was like stereo out of sync. Fast, mechanical, coordinated beyond instinct. They were the only ones who might survive longer than expected, but probably not together. Dre Searle was bragging again, something about how his last mission ended with 4 rebels welded to a blast door and one almost art piece carved out of a civvy. He laughed at his own joke. Nobody else did. He carried a belt-fed shredder like it was a trophy, and spoke with the steady rhythm of someone who knew pain wasn't a consequence, but a tool. Rim gave him a look. Searle just winked. "You look nervous, Greaseman, don't worry. Whatever eats you, I'll kill after." "Comforting," Rim muttered. Searle smirked and went back to checking his ammo drum. It was full, always was. And then, there was Rim. He was hunched over his drone like it owed him rent, fingers jittering across the interface, chain-smoking a synth stick that sparked violet at the tip. He looked like someone who never got dry after birth. Nervous, angular, skin too tight on the bones like his body hadn't been given enough time to finish itself. He noticed me and gave a half salute with the wrong hand. "Heard you were dead. I heard you were competent." He laughed, too loud, then caught himself and coughed into his jacket. His voice was sandpaper dipped in old glue. "You get jokes. I thought you were one of those don't talk, just kill types. I talk, just not to you." Threx stepped in before Rim could take offense. "Mission brief in 30 seconds. Helmet up." Everyone went quiet. The projection ignited mid-air, a rough render of relay station K-12. It looked like a broken spinal column floating in a dish of stars. The outer decks were bent inwards like claws. External shielding was ruptured. Gravity well around it spiked off the chart. No beacon, no signal. Just back on the grid after 7 years gone. "Station was lost during a Class 7 solar event," Threx said, voice smooth like poured wax. "Science mandate deemed it uninhabitable, presumed vaporized. 3 days ago, it re-entered detectable orbit." "And we're supposed to go knock," someone muttered. Threx continued. "Target is the internal black box located near the sub-reactor cradle. Data core must be recovered intact. Anything else, classified as non-essential, including this team." No one asked about extraction. We already knew. 2 hours later, we were in the shuttle bay. The dropship was a cracked skull of a vehicle, armor plate peeling, internals screaming with fuel logic errors. But it flew, and that's all the hegemony needed. Not safe, just fast. Inside, strapped down and rising towards something abandoned by reason, I let my eyes close, but not to rest. I listened. You learn to hear your own heartbeat in a pressure rig. Not the rhythm, but the interval between each one, the waiting. That's where the mission lives. Between beats, between seconds. Threx sat across from me, reading something invisible in his HUD. Rim muttered about radiation attenuation spikes. Prax clicked his jaw like it was loose. The closer we got, the louder the static in the comms. Not sound, more like absence that you could feel behind your eyes. My neck implant began to warm, spine tether sinking. Outside, the station turned slowly in its orbital drift. One half burned raw, the other frozen over in strange lattice structures, like the frost had learned geometry. I stared at it, and it stared back. Not metaphor, not paranoia, just fact. Some things aren't supposed to return. K-12 wasn't a structure, not anymore. It was a consequence. And they sent us in because no one would ask questions when we didn't come out. But that's what made this simple. Orders are orders and everything else is just static. The first thing that hits you on breach is not sound or light. It's orientation, or the lack of it. You move forward and your stomach insists you're falling sideways. Up is behind your teeth, down is wherever your feet aren't. No alarms, no impact. Just your inner ear breaking up with your sense of direction. Rim calls it gravity smear. I call it a good test. The men who start retching now aren't going to make it past the first corridor. The docking tunnel shuddered, then slackened. Connection complete. Exterior seals fractured like calcified bone plates. The ship's magnetic anchor latched onto the exposed bulkhead of K-12, which looked less like an airlock and more like a torn-out mouth. Weld seams fractured, edges blistered from thermal overburn. Rim was mumbling, scanning with his drone. His voice cracked like glass in soup. "There's heat signatures," he said, tapping into his handheld. "Sort of. Not consistent ones. Flashes. Like the walls are breathing. This isn't mechanical, it's not standard containment failure either." He paused, frowning at a string of corrupted metadata. "One of these files still has a name tag, Biocon 6. Must have been a research strain. Classified levels wiped, though." "Weapon?" Juno asked. "Not sure. Probably bioadaptive. Whatever it was, it didn't die with the station." He didn't sound curious. He sounded disappointed to be right. Prax went first, mag boots thudding into the hatchway. He took it like a challenge. Vex followed him, twin to Korev, both silent. Juno spun his coin before stepping in, then kissed it and clipped it to his helmet strap. A charm for a corpse. I was last through. Dre Searle entered just ahead of me, cracking his knuckles like he expected applause. "Smells like boiled corpse soup in here," he said cheerfully. "I like it." "Good," Threx muttered. "Stay in front." "Always do." The moment my boot crossed the threshold, the tether implant in my spine buzzed. It felt like it blinked, the same way the station did once we stepped inside. K-12 wasn't dead. It was paused. Interior gravity was technically present, but you couldn't trust it. The floor seemed magnetic in places, liquid in others. Rim's handheld showed local grav at 0.8 for one corridor, then 2.3 in a chamber 10 meters away. He recalibrated twice. No good. "Shouldn't even be functional," he muttered. "Reactor decay like this. We should be floating, but it's holding. Or trying to." The architecture didn't match the schematics. K-12 was built like a laddered spire. Modular labs, central spine, emergency overrides in the maintenance wings. But the corridor we entered forked too early, curved where it shouldn't, and ended in a junction that wasn't on the map. I looked for numbers, glyphs, signs, found half of one, a designation strip fused into the wall like melted bone, unreadable. Something had passed through here with enough force or heat to warp the walls into soft bulges. "Think something hit it?" Juno asked. "No," Threx replied. "Something grew into it." 10 minutes in, Korev stopped. He crouched, hand against the wall. "It's vibrating," he said. "Not engine pulse, higher, in the structure." We all went still. There it was. A tremor, irregular. Not mechanical, not seismic, like a slow insect pulse in the marrow of the walls. A heartbeat, maybe. Prax muttered, "I swear I saw that same bulkhead 2 turns back." He was right. Rim's drone confirmed it. We had looped. But the loop wasn't there when we entered. The station had reconfigured. Not by design, by instinct. That was when I first noticed the temperature shifting, like walking through thermal phantoms. 1 second my visor read ambient -3 degrees Celsius. Next it spiked to 27 degrees Celsius before stabilizing again. Time was next. Threx's motion tracker beeped, a shape behind us, then ahead, then neither. The log showed the same shape 3 times, with a 2-second difference. Rim tried to explain temporal echo. Failed. Just called it bad physics. The first body we found was half flattened against a pressure door, literally flattened. Torso wide as a table, skull smeared like clay into the alloy. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just spread, like something had pulled him through himself. His ID was unreadable. Uniform tag said, Level 4 Technician, Schema Red. Unfamiliar rank, unlisted clearance. Korev knelt to check for vitals. Habit. Vex stopped him with a hand. No pulse, and no mass signature. What? Mass is off. Lighter than he should be, as if he's not all here. I finished. Rim scanned him with his drone. The results showed displacement, like half the body was out of sync. Not invisible, just elsewhere. Physics tear, Rim said. Probably during the flare event, folded through a temporary gravity bloom. He paused, eyes twitching. Or maybe he just slipped a second too early, or late. Threx whispered a line like it was ritual. The station logs the dead, even if time forgets them. We moved on. The corridor beyond was choked in condensed vapor. It hung like suspended breath, unmoving. Rim's drone passed through it, then buzzed and dropped, dead, shorted. Internal clock reset to 0. Vex stopped. I saw Korev. I looked. Korev was 3 meters ahead, watching Vex. No, Vex said. I saw me next to Korev, half a second ago, looking back. No one moved. We all stared at the point Vex indicated. Empty corridor. Temporal slip, Rim said. Or echo, doesn't matter. This station's eating time like it's starving. We reached a central maintenance junction, formerly an emergency shelter. It was partially intact. Half the room coated in frost. the other in heat-warped slag. Asymmetric damage. Juno moved to check the shelter console. He said something I didn't catch, then he froze, and Vex said, "Korev." We turned. Korev was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. His rifle dropped to the floor, still warm. Vex didn't shout, just stared. He blinked twice, then turned and kept walking. I checked the floor. No scuff, no impact, like a frame skipped in reality. We made camp in the junction. Vex refused to speak. Rim worked in silence, fingers twitching, eyes flicking between diagnostics that didn't hold still. Juno sat cross-legged, flipping his coin. Dropped it once. It landed on edge and stayed upright. None of us touched it. Later, I sat alone near the boundary of the shelter zone, watching the hall. The quiet wasn't quiet. It was full of things that weren't there. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in remnants. And this place, K-12, wasn't haunted. It was remembering. Badly. Violently. There was no wake for Korev, no moment of silence. Vex stopped speaking entirely. He still moved, still responded to hand signals, still tracked his sector like a machine wound too tight. But something behind the eyes had been unplugged. Threx marked Korev's name into the wall with the flat edge of his combat knife. 5 slashes in a square pattern. It wasn't a ritual. It was a ledger. Even Rim didn't make a joke this time. Juno watched from the corner of the shelter zone, coin between his fingers, lips moving silently. He wasn't praying, just counting. Always counting. We broke camp without ceremony. We descended into the lower spine of K-12 through a maintenance shaft designed for drones. Human bodies weren't meant to move through it. No handrails, no consistent floor. We crawled over ruptured pressure ducts and what might have once been a coolant loop, now twisted into a corkscrew and fused with some kind of fibrous resin that pulsed when you touched it. Prax tried to cut a piece loose, and it bled. Not red, something darker, thicker. Mucosal, but metallic smelling, like rust-made flesh. It retracted from the blade like a nerve twitch. "Nope," Rim muttered. "No, thank you. That's a vein. We're walking through a freaking capillary." It was only half metaphor. I saw shapes in the metal, imprints, like the alloy had softened under pressure and something had leaned into it. The silhouettes were humanoid, roughly, but the proportions were off. Limbs too long, no necks, faces flat, like man-shaped warnings melted into the hull. Threx examined one closely, running fingers over the warped edges. "This isn't memory metal," he said. "It shouldn't have reformed at all." He tilted his head. "Unless it was never metal to begin with." Rim scanned the wall. His sensor flashed red, then went black. "We're past science now," he said quietly. We reached a circular junction, a chamber meant to regulate the auxiliary life support grid. The schematic had labeled it Distribution Core Theta. The label on the wall now read something different. Half-scraped glyphs, some in hegemony standard, some not. I recognized none of them. Prax paused at the threshold. "Where the hell's Searle?" I turned. He hadn't spoken in a while. Last I saw, he was dragging that belt-fed cannon like a child's toy, cracking wise about cooking meat off reactor leaks. Now he was gone. Vex swept the corridor behind us with a glance. "Didn't hear anything." Rim checked his motion tracker. Nothing. "Could have lagged behind," Juno offered quickly. "Maybe just taking a leak." None of us believed it. Then I saw the smear across the floor. A heavy rig lay half-folded near the far wall. Ammo belt slung across the chest. Shredder half-melted to the hand like it had fused there mid-fire. The body had been opened like a pressure blister. No trauma pattern, no wounds. Just peeled. Bones intact. Organs missing, but not removed. Absorbed. It was Dre Searle. The blood trail stretched a few meters, then dragged upward, across the wall into a bulkhead vent reshaped into a spiral, reinforced with what looked like spinal cable braided with bone. Juno stepped back, whispering something under his breath. Prax didn't blink. "That thing took Searle like it was hungry." I turned to the far end of the chamber where the walls curved upward unnaturally. Too smooth, too organic. It looked like a growth, a tumor in the metal. It wasn't a creature, not in the traditional sense, no limbs, no eyes, no targetable anatomy. It was a mass of biomass and slag, coiled into itself and armored in wreckage and reactor soot. Heat readings were inconsistent, cold at the core, hot at the periphery. The smart rifles couldn't lock onto it. Rim's drone refused to even process its shape. It's ignoring light, Rim said. It's not cloaking, it's just not there in certain spectra. Until it wants to be, Threx added. Vex took a shot at it. Just one. A clean burst from his rifle into the edge of the mass. The round vanished before contact. The impact sound arrived a full second after the trigger pulled. The stain quivered. Slowly. Not in reaction, in thought. Then it moved. Not aggressive, just a slow rearranging. The metal around it curled inward, bones pulled from somewhere beginning to fuse into the wall. One shape, two shapes, then a dozen, arms, ribs, vertebrae, forming a lattice that shifted with the wall. That's armor, I said. It's building armor. Rim stumbled back. It's using the environment, waste, corpses, anything, with more precision than any drone I've ever seen. It's not mutating randomly. It's modular. It's designing itself. Then it stopped moving, entirely, like it was listening, judging us. I approached it. The stain remained still, its surface glossy with pooled coolant, reactor slag, and something that looked like carbon-scored skin. For a moment I saw myself reflected in it, like a memory of myself, seen through thermal haze. It knew we were here, and it chose to let us go. Backtracking became impossible. The station had closed our entry path, corridors folded inward, stairwells crushed flat. One passage had been sheared into a crescent, leading in circles through the same 2 rooms 4 times before Rim realized it. We moved deeper, down levels that shouldn't have existed, unregistered access ways with no corresponding log. They were smoother, less industrial. The walls bore no weld lines, no screws, no panels to access. Just a soft, curved surface like something had extruded the corridors whole, grown them in place, adapting to needs we didn't understand. Some parts of the floor held footprints, but stretched. Others seemed to erase behind us. Vex tapped a marker glyph onto a doorway, only for it to vanish when we looked back. Rim muttered something about entropy recursion. Juno didn't speak at all. He just touched the coin at his neck and kept walking as if he was afraid his own voice might shift him out of alignment. I checked my internal chronometer. It jumped back a second, then forward 3. Time was leaking here, bending around localized stress fractures in reality, fraying like a rope unspooling strand by strand. Threx found a broken console near a ventilation cluster. He accessed the internal logs through manual rerouting, bypassing the fried grid with a needle fused patch. The logs weren't corrupted, they had been rewritten. Scientific entries replaced with analogies. Math formulas replaced with poetry. Wasn't a weapon, Rim said. Biocon 6. It was supposed to adapt, that's all. Survive radiation. They put it in an environment where the rules failed and expected it to stay dumb. But it didn't just survive. It learned, Threx said. No, Rim whispered. It understood. He turned to me then, real fear in his voice, not the performative kind. Calvec, if this thing's learning, every movement we make, every shot, every death, it's building a model. I nodded once. Then we stop showing it anything it can use. There's a rhythm to madness if you pay attention. It starts small. A hesitation before a movement. A look that lingers a second too long on a corner that shouldn't matter. A moment when someone touches their own face like they're not entirely sure it's theirs anymore. The others couldn't feel it yet. But I could. Not fear. Something deeper. Recognition. The same sensation I'd had crawling through irradiated hull fragments during the debris protocol on Vir Elta, the world behaving as if it had rules while quietly unmaking them behind your back. Threx walked ahead of me. He'd stopped speaking in full sentences, reducing his speech to keywords and glances. He began tapping out patterns on the butt of his rifle. Binary, maybe, or some old cadence only he understood. Juno had gone quiet too, but not from discipline. He kept running his thumb over the coin like it was a whetstone, not flipping it anymore, just wearing it down, atom by atom, as if eventually he could file the station away with it. I watched him mouth numbers under his breath again, counting backwards, always from a different starting point, never reaching zero. Rim had begun scratching his suit, along the ribs and the inner thigh where the material was reinforced. Every time we stopped, he picked at it like something underneath needed out. The lower levels of K-12 had no designation, no directionals, just curve after curve of metal softened by time and heat, as if the station had begun digesting itself. In one corridor, the floor dipped unexpectedly. We all saw it, flat one moment, concave the next. We stepped over it anyway. None of us trusted the geometry, but none of us stopped. That was the moment I realized we weren't walking forward anymore. Something about the air had changed. It was thicker, like a room that had held a scream too long. The lights no longer strobed or buzzed. They simply hovered, fixed, like memories too rigid to forget. And that's when time began to bleed. The first sign was my boot step echoing before it landed. I froze. Checked my HUD, still ticking, but the seconds weren't uniform. One would drag. The next would vanish. There was no pattern. I looked at Rim. He was blinking out of rhythm with himself. His eyes stayed shut too long, then snapped open as if making up for lost time. He didn't seem to notice. Then the smells began. I smelled singed cloth, exactly like the aftermath of a frag shell in a confined structure. Glasslight, Sector E. Smelled it before I took the right half of a platoon off the map. No reason for that scent to exist here. Juno staggered suddenly, slammed his shoulder against a support column. His eyes darted in 3 directions at once. "Did we pass this already?" he asked. "No," Threx answered, "but we will." Vex twitched. His shoulder lifted like he was about to speak, then settled. His eyes were dry, wide. "Movement," I said. They all stopped. Rim raised his drone, now jury-rigged into a limp configuration that hovered poorly, stuttering through space like it was flying through syrup. "Rear corridor, 17 meters." I raised my rifle, but nothing came. We turned forward again and found a wall where there hadn't been one. Smooth, featureless. We hadn't turned, hadn't deviated, and yet we faced a barrier we hadn't approached. Vex stepped forward, tapped it, then shoved hard. No give. He turned to speak, then froze. Rim vomited. Dry. He'd eaten nothing in 12 hours. Juno fell to one knee, gripping his coin so hard his glove audibly split. I was finally sure. Time was detaching from causality. Events were happening in reverse, or in clusters, or skipping over themselves. I raised my rifle again, aiming backward, and counted 6 seconds. On the 6th second, something passed where we had been standing before the wall appeared. It wasn't visible, not in the conventional sense. The lights bent toward it, subtly, like trees leaning in a windless field. The metal around its path hissed and recoiled. Then it was gone. We waited 10 more seconds. Nothing. Threx finally spoke. "It's not stalking us. It's sampling," Rim wheezed, voice thin. "I think it's learning movement patterns, not ours. Times. How it fits inside events. I think Biocon's riding it like current, choosing where to appear based on when it will matter most." We broke the wall with thermite. It screamed. Not sonically. Pressure screamed. Subatomic recoil. Like the corridor hadn't just been sealed, but reluctantly reopened. The room beyond was vast. It hadn't existed on the schematics. I knew that instantly. It was cathedral-shaped, only not religious, reverent in a different way. The walls curved upward like ribs. The ceiling shimmered with something too fluid to be metal and too structured to be organic. This was a nest of data. I felt information hanging in the air, input without sensory delivery. The pressure of knowing something just beyond comprehension. At the center of the chamber, a structure. Biocon's origin, a mass of composite plating fused with reactor slag. Scaffolding formed from what used to be support struts, now interlaced with calcified muscle fiber. Screens embedded along the structure flashed frames, some blank, some blurs. One showed my face years ago in court-martial uniform, gagged. Rim staggered toward it. "No," I said. He stopped, but his eyes didn't leave it. "It remembers," he said. "It remembers everything. Not just what it saw, what we were, who sent it, who made it." Juno knelt from exhaustion. His hands twitched over his knees like he couldn't convince them to hold still. Vex simply stared into the structure. "Do you see it?" he asked. No one answered. I stepped forward. The structure didn't react. "Why is it letting us see this?" I said aloud. Threx responded, "Because it's already decided what happens next." Rim turned. "To us?" "To itself." Rim played back footage from his drone. Slow-motion review of the anomaly we saw in the corridor before the wall. Frame by frame, he isolated a blur. 12 pixels, no color, distorted curvature. But then, he rewound 5 seconds. Same blur, different angle. A position shift across recorded time. Rim looked at me. "Calvec, it's not tracking us. We're tracking it, after it's already moved." Threx said it clearly, like a sentence he'd saved for when it mattered. "This isn't a station anymore. It's an organism. And it doesn't live in space. It lives between events, between decisions, between seconds." I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I felt something familiar. Respect. The kind one predator gives another before the first move is made. When I opened them again, the structure was gone. It had simply folded into the surrounding architecture like breath vanishing in cold air, leaving behind only copper sheen of heat smeared across the walls. The others hadn't even seen it vanish. They were too deep in their own heads. Rim was on his knees, muttering voltage ranges like a litany, trying to rebuild meaning from power loss readouts. Vex was still staring upward, eyes scanning lines that weren't there, mapping things he couldn't explain. Threx had gone still and quiet, hands clasped behind his back, like a priest waiting to officiate a funeral he already knew would go unobserved. We weren't at the end yet, but I could feel it nearby, curled in on itself, waiting for one final test. I said nothing, just stood and started walking. The others followed because that's what they were trained to do. That's what broken soldiers do. They keep moving, even when they know the mission's already lost. The core chamber came into view a half hour later. We crossed a vertical shaft where the laws of gravity had given up entirely. Vex floated through without hesitation. Rim clung to the walls, whispering apologies to a god he didn't believe in. Threx floated beside me like he was already dead. The door to the core wasn't a door anymore. It had become something less aperture, more threshold. The walls around it were stretched tight, fused with material I recognized but couldn't name. Reactor shielding plates, crushed bone, coagulant lattice. I pushed my hand into it, and it gave slightly, like pushing through a membrane thick with resin. I passed through. Inside was the black box. It wasn't black, and it wasn't a box. The term had always been shorthand, an opaque package containing command records, thermal logs, encryption stacks, and event tags. But this thing, it had grown. It rose from the center of the chamber like a spinal obelisk, wrapped in cooling fins and sinew thread. Coils of spent wire ran through it like veins. The surface was iridescent, oil-slick and glinting with embedded circuitry. Symbols shifted across its face, not carved, not projected, grown. Rim breathed in too sharply and started to tremble. "That's not storage. That's a hybrid node. Bio-integrated logic mass. This thing's thinking." He looked at me. "You can't pull this out of the network. You'd kill it. You'd kill everything." I stared at the construct. He was wrong. I approached and placed my palm against its face. It opened. Data slotted out from the central stem, flexing like tendrils, forming into the familiar triple-coil interface. The original black box array still intact, still alive under layers of adaptation. I connected my suit's core to it. The download began instantly. Heat surged through my chest plate. The feed resisted, as if it wanted to know why I was taking it. 3 minutes later, it was done. I held the core now, smaller than a skull, heavier than guilt. Rim turned, eyes wide, mouth trembling. We have to destroy this. There's no safe way to transmit what's in there. The mandate's going to erase it anyway. This isn't about the mission anymore. This is... I cut him off. We're done here. Threx didn't move. Vex raised his rifle slightly. Not at me, at the air, listening for something. He lowered it again, uncertain. I turned to Rim. We'll need a two-prong exfil. You and Vex sweep corridor K6 and map a fallback route. I'll clear access on the old mag rail shaft. Rim didn't like it. You're splitting us up now? It's the only way out, I lied. The fallback's in the shielded spine. I've already mapped part of it. If we can create a two-path divergence, maybe the station can't block both. Vex nodded automatically. He trusted logic, even if it was flawed. Threx said nothing, just watched me. Rim muttered, 2 routes. Okay, 2 routes, fine. I handed Vex a detonation beacon. 10 minutes. If we're not at the rendezvous by then, blow the shaft. He took it without question. I found the old vent corridor near the eastern power bloom, half sealed, warped from gravitational drag, but still navigable. The route I'd been watching, the route no one else knew existed. I slipped inside. I heard the door seal behind me with a soft, wet click, like muscle coiling. The path to the shuttle was slow. The black box burned against my back, every step sending a pulse into my spine like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. The station made no attempt to stop me. It closed doors behind me and opened others ahead of me. It was escorting me now, not out of kindness, out of recognition. I was useful. I reached the dock. 1 shuttle remained, a slim atmospheric craft rated for short bursts and burnouts. Not meant for long-haul exfil, but it would be enough. I powered it manually, and the seat adjusted around me. As the engine cycled, I saw the station through the viewport, no longer looming, no longer silent. It didn't blink, it didn't move, it simply allowed. I strapped in, input vector, killed comms, and launched. As I breached the station's gravity well, my internal chronometer jumped forward 3 seconds, then 2 seconds backward. I didn't feel it. Time here was elastic, meaningless. The stars came back into view slowly. I didn't need to see what happened to the others. They were either gone already or would be soon. The station didn't want me dead, it wanted me out. A witness, a weapon. And I understood. Survival isn't victory, it's selection. And I passed. They debrief you like they're diffusing something. 3 men in a room painted the color of diluted grief, seated behind a panel that doesn't need to exist. Not one of them makes eye contact. They all stare past me like I'm light-bent, like I never really came back. They call me Asset, not Calvec, not Ashglass. Just the designation said with surgical distance. I sit still, hands folded, boots lined to the edge of the floor panel. My rifle's gone. My suit's been stripped. I'm wearing issue grey, the kind of neutral that never belonged to anyone. The room smells like ozone and thawed sealant. They want to ask about Biocon 6, about K-12, about the status of the team. But instead they start with the black box. Did you recover the artifact? The man on the left says. His voice has no corners, no rhythm, like a throat grown in a lab. I nod. Slide the case onto the table. The man in the center speaks next. Higher clearance, younger, still thinks control is synonymous with containment. Any indication of contamination? I say nothing. They take it as consent. The third man, older, leaning back, face slack in that way only the truly powerful learn to do, smiles. Well then, he says, voice like cooled wax. We appreciate your service. The Provisional Command Assets Division will review your sentence and recommend appropriate adjustment. Your contract will... I'm not staying, I say. The man in the center blinks like his neural buffer stalled. You're not what? I'm not staying. They look at each other and one of them nods. 2 doors behind me slide open. Not a threat, an invitation, like they'd planned to let me walk, just not this soon. Leave the core, the center one says. We'll ensure it's... I pick it back up. The room stills. The older man leans forward now, just slightly. You understand that refusal to comply? I do. He studies me. No anger, no attempt to rise. Are you blackmailing the hegemony? No, I stand. I'm out-evolving it. He laughs. It's not cruel, not loud, but it's hollow in that way that implies understanding he shouldn't admit to. I walk out, and no one stops me. I take the transit through 4 layers of orbital drift, into the fringe channels where ships don't transmit registration unless they want to be vaporized. There's a vessel waiting. Small, pulse-hulled, rated for deep system loops without crew or logs. I boarded it 6 months ago, told it to wait. Inside, the controls still recognize me. The black box hums behind the pilot seat, tucked into the cradle I carved for it. Slight indentations where its heat softens the plating. It doesn't resist being there. It knows it's not a prisoner. It knows I'm not afraid of it. I drift for 4 days through the dead shell expanse, coasting under the comnet. The box never moves, never glows, but on the 3rd night I catch my reflection in the viewport and see it there behind me, like it's running simulations of my silhouette. Mapping me back. I don't flinch. We've stopped testing each other. We're aligned now. I land in the outer zones. No registry, no return vector. The atmosphere is thin. The terrain's mostly burned stone and permafrost veins, but I picked it for the silence, not the view. The shuttle auto-destructs an hour after I leave it per protocol. I carry the box on my shoulder. Its weight adjusts every few steps, like it's learning the terrain too. The snow doesn't crunch, it fractures. Shards instead of flakes, like the planet gave up on softness a long time ago. I find the ridge I marked and start digging with my hands. Takes 3 hours. I don't stop once. The cavity I build is temporary, just enough to shield, not enough to bury. I want it to see the stars, to remember what's out here. I place the black box down, seal it with scrap plating. No encryption, no lock. It knows I'm coming back. I leave the ridge and hike south. There's a comm relay I stashed 10 clicks down the slope, wrapped in insulation and buried under basalt. I won't activate it yet. Not until the hegemony makes its next move, not until they send someone else. And they will. They always do. I sit at the edge of the ridge that night and watch the sky ripple with aurora knots. They're not made of light, they're decay trails. Radiation ghosts from a dead system still trying to talk. I listen. I wait. And I understand something I never did before. Biocon 6 isn't a mistake. It's not a weapon. It's a pattern. Adaptation unchained from ethics. Survival without apology. Memory that builds itself into future form. And I'm not here to stop it. I'm here to be ready. The organism lived. So did I. We understand each other now, and neither of us is done evolving.